What are some dark facts about fairy tales? Story 1, probably the first thing that comes to mind when one thinks of the 1940 Disney adaptation of Pinocchio, is Jiminy Cricket, the charming little sidekick who sings the movie's famous song, When You Wish Upon a Star, and the puppet whose nose grows to tell falsehoods. Nevertheless, Time magazine writer Richard Corliss notes that the movie also taught moral lessons in the most useful way, by scaring the crap out of the little ones. As an example, the screenplay emphasizes the dangers of being alone and vulnerable to an adult's malice. As the kidnappers take Pinocchio away, Stromboli tells him, When you grow too old, you will make good firewood. The picture was based on An Unpleasant Tale by Carlo Collodi from 1883, although the original narrative is far more so. After Pinocchio's cricket companion teases him about his wooden head, the puppet becomes enraged and smashes Pinocchio with a hammer. Story 2, movie critic Richard Corliss lauded the 1989 Disney feature adaptation of The Little Mermaid, which tells the story of Prince Eric's love for the stunning half-human sea creature Ariel, calling it a model of buoyancy and poignancy. The story's inspiration, nevertheless, is a far darker work by Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, 1837. Ariel strikes a bargain with the sea witch Ursula in the film adaptation. In return for her melodious voice, which she encases in a seashell, Ursula briefly turns her into a human. According to Anderson, the witch strips the Little Mermaid of her voice by severing her tongue. Plus, there is no happy ending in the original narrative, unlike in the film. The tiny mermaid instead marries a human, loses her prince, and then, as she and her sisters slowly ascend to heaven, she grins at him one more time. Story 3, fairy tales sometimes include evil stepmothers who were once actual moms. The hero's horrible treatment by envious stepmothers is simple to picture. A little-known fact about fairy tales, though, is that many of these villains were once the actual parents. The original Hansel and Gretel story has the children's biological mother persuading their father to leave them in the woods. In some adaptations of Snow White, the villainous queen is actually the daughter's mother, who is plotting her daughter's death. Fairy tales typically exclude evil moms, because the Grimm brothers reasoned that people would be more tolerant of such actions if they came from a step-parent. Story 4, Little Red Riding Hood, the well-known contemporary fairy tale, is based on the German legend of Little Red Cap. A courageous woodsman, as depicted in the Grimms, slices open the wolf's belly in order to save Red and Grandma. There is no such savior in the French source of the fairy tale, though. Dead or alive, Little Red is devoured. It ends there. The conclusion of this story is that French girls should not be tempted to compromise their virtues for the sake of unknown males. They were like Little Red Riding Hood. Once they made a mistake here, there was no turning back. Oh my goodness. Story 5. The beloved Goldilocks girl wasn't always blonde, believe it or not. An elderly woman who uses sailor slang is included in an earlier rendition of this story, The Tale of Three Bears, written by Robert Southey. Following in Goldilocks' footsteps, she samples the bears' porridge, seats, and coziness. After the bears return to their destroyed home, she darts out the window to get away. However, things go gloomy in an earlier version of the narrative written by Eleanor Muir. The incensed bears plot to harm the elderly intruder by attempting to scorch, submerge, and ultimately impale her on the spire of St. Paul's Cathedral. These things just don't add up, Story 6. Because it started the current tendency of sanitized fairy tales, this narrative stands apart. Walt Disney chose to adapt Little Snow White, a tale by the Brothers Grimm, into his first feature film in 1938. He went with his instincts and borrowed $1.5 million to produce it, despite the fact that naysayers, including his wife, Lillian, attempted to dissuade him, claiming that adults wouldn't like a musical starring a group of bearded dwarfs. Disney was correct, it seems. A stunning young woman who defeats a wicked queen and wins the love of a dashing prince became an enormous hit with Depression-era audiences seeking inspiration. Disney retained the gruesome heart-in-a-box aspect from the Brothers Grimm, but he removed some even gorier elements. When Snow White's wicked stepmother is called to her wedding in their version, the guests are asked to cook a pair of iron shoes over coals. After that, she's made to dance in excruciating pain in the red-hot shoes until she passes out. Story 7. The 2013 Disney smash hit Frozen is remarkably different from the story The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, which was published in 1844. Two sisters are featured in the film adaptation. Elsa, who possesses the supernatural ability to make snow and ice, and Anna, whose safety is jeopardized because of her sister's powers. Elsa eventually becomes Queen of the North, but her life takes a turn for the worst when her sister Anna accepts the marriage proposal of the mysterious and terrifying Prince Hans, who has come all the way from the south to visit. All is resolved when Elsa deports Hans and Anna finds love with an ice seller, following a series of events involving ice. The Anderson tale, on the other hand, reads more like a nightmare. A magical mirror breaks, and a small kid named Kay ends up with glass fragments lodged in his eye and heart. For reasons that remain unclear, the glass transforms into ice, which in turn causes a strange figure dressed in white to swoop down on Kay during a snowstorm and capture him. In order to get him out of the Snow Queen's palace, where a swarm of porcupines, snakes, and bear cubs are protecting him, his sister Gerda must undertake a search and rescue operation. Story 8. A witch attempts to end a young princess in the 1959 Disney picture Sleeping Beauty by casting a spell that says she will die at the age of 16 from a self-inflicted prick on a spindle. Because a good fairy can only partially break the curse, the princess will sleep until her betrothed prince kisses her, rousing her from her slumber. That is also essentially the plot point of the Brothers Grimm and Charles Perrault adaptations of the story. However, they revise the plot from earlier renditions, such as Perceforest from 14th century France, in which the prince couldn't control his desire to have relations with an unclothed and unconscious young lady he found in a bedroom upon his return. While she is sleeping, she gets pregnant and gives birth. However, the young woman is startled awake when her baby mistakenly bites her finger, thinking it's a breast. This causes the flax chip from the spindle to come out. Instead of a sleeping lady giving birth to one set of twins, it is a monarch who does it in The Sun, the Moon, and Talia, a narrative by Giambattista Basile published in 1634. Upon learning this, his queen orders her cook to abduct the children, slaughter them, and then serve them as a punishment to her disobedient husband. Lucky for us, the chef just can't bring himself to make it, and opts to pair lamb with it. Story 9. In the first Frog Prince story, there was no kissing. True love's kiss can cast out any enchantment, but this traditional fairy tale has a different take on the matter. A gentle kiss does not change the small frog in the first Frog Prince tale. It's the princess's angry outburst as she smashes her body against her bedroom wall. Works like a charm, and she can't contain her joy at seeing her frog fiancé transformed into a handsome guy. Some tellings of the tale have the princess severing the frog's head to end the curse. The lesson we're supposed to take away from this is vague at best. Story 10. Enchantment and Despair. Focused on arranged marriage at first. Please understand that I despise this particular fairy tale reality. With its timeless themes of love and forgiveness, Disney's Beauty and the Beast is a beloved classic that no one can deny. The original Beauty and the Beast story is very different from this. Actually, it was intended as a morality tale for French girls to help them prepare for arranged marriages to older and occasionally nasty men. The narrative essentially highlights the financial benefits of arranged weddings, while also illustrating how love may blossom later on, with any hope. Story 11. Out of the three pigs, one eats the wolf. Unless you read Joseph Jacobs' original story, you likely recall the Three Little Pigs as a charming, innocent children's romp. The wolf attempts to outwit the third pig sibling after devouring the other two from the rubble of their homes. After he tries everything else and fails miserably, the big bad wolf jumps to the top of the brick home and descends the chimney, plunging directly into a pot of boiling water. Instantly, the wolf succumbs, and the lone remaining pig prepares a feast from his remains and devours him throughout his meal. Do you mean like the rule of the fittest? Story 12, A Little Match Girl. Breakdowns from a freeze and perishes all by herself. A little girl stranded on a bitter New Year's Eve winter night is the protagonist of Hans Christian Andersen's short tale, The Little Match Girl. Despite her shoeless ambulation about town, not a single one had purchased a match that evening. Fearing her father would punish her for not selling matches, she is unable to return home. However, returning home would not improve her condition. Cold and hungry, she would still remain. Sitting against a wall, the little girl strikes matches, hoping for a little warmth while she fantasizes about a better life. However, it does not endure for the entire night, as the young girl with the flushed cheeks and the gaping mouth slumped against the wall, chilled to death on the last evening of the old year. A small, pitiful figure was blessed with the arrival of the new year. Holding the matches one bundle of which was on the verge of being burned. The youngster sat there, rigid and chilly. Story 13, Aladdin steals his treasures by having his wife sleep with a sorcerer. A lot more magic and deception happens in the original Aladdin than in the Disney-fied version that everyone is familiar with. After the thieves steal Aladdin's lamp and genie, he uses a magic ring to get himself to the sorcerer's palace, where the story's one horrifying scene takes place. Aladdin orders his wife to divert the sorcerer's attention so that he can reclaim all of his belongings. Show the magician that you haven't forgotten me by putting on your most beautiful dress and greeting him with smiles. Aladdin advises his bride, say you'd want to try some of his country's wine and invite him to dinner. I will tell you what to do while he is gone. He'll go get some. Story 14. In a live commentary on his own demise, the Gingerbread Man. A charming yet peculiar tale. The Gingerbread Man, or the Gingerbread Boy in earlier versions, tells the tale of a gingerbread man who comes to life and flees from those who would devour him. He manages to evade a small elderly woman, a barn teeming with threshers, a field rife with mowers, a cow, and a pig. But in the end, a fox charms him into eating him. While being fooled by a fox, the gingerbread man not only dies, but he also recounts his own demise in the process. Ah, crap, I've used all my quarters. Oh, I'm almost there. And before you know it, I'm 3/4 gone. Finally, she said, I'm all gone. And after that, she remained silent. Story 15, Germans, about the year 1300, were the first to tell the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. The story takes place in the German town of Hamelin in 1284 during a rat infestation, the same plague that actually occurred throughout the Middle Ages. The hamlet hires a piper who, according to them, can keep the rodents at bay with his colorful, pied attire. He abducts every youngster in the town when the residents fall short of paying him the money he had promised. Some contemporary adaptations have him taking the kids to a cave and keeping them there until the parents of the community agree to pay him. Only then does he release them. But in the darker original, the piper does the same thing he did to the rats, lures them into the Weser River, and they all drown. Pedophilia is implied throughout the narrative, according to some contemporary academic. Story 16. The Chopped Off Hands Penta. Yes, the same author as Sun, Moon, and Talia. Penta slits her own wrists after her brother, the king, dies of a sudden and tragic loss. Thrown into the water, the king binds her to a chest. But luckily, another king comes to her rescue and crowns her queen. A jealous fishwife tells the king that Penta has given birth to a puppy, while her husband is at sea, which causes the king to be envious. The king sends word to have the fishwife set on fire after returning home to discover he has a son instead of a pet. The lesson of this story is unclear to me. Separate your hands from the blade? Having a puppy baby? My head is spinning. Story 17, Puss in Boots. Although he was the main character in certain folktales, Puss in Boots is more known for his boot-touting antics and charming personality, which have made him one of the most beloved fictional cats of all time. Puss is more than just a cute anthropomorphic cat with a vanity for leather goods. He's a cunning, fast, and cunning creature who used his charm, cunning, and cunning to bring his master fame and fortune, as well as a princess bride, a castle, and endless riches to ensure they lived the high life. This cunning feline appears to promote the adage that the ends justify the means, even when the outcomes are less than desirable, and he approaches life with a touch of optimism and levity. But his tactics display a Machiavellian brutality. Story 18, The Tale of Rapunzel. The expression, Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair, has become all too famous thanks to the German fairy tale's enduring popularity and the accompanying amount of mockery. The happy couple, though, had to go through a lot more than meets the eye. The prince was blinded after falling from the tower into the thorny brambles below, and Rapunzel was cast out into the wilderness by the angry witch while she was pregnant. Only after this did they finally meet again. More pessimistic interpretations of the story exist as well. In these, the prince who had no intention of marrying Rapunzel leaves her behind when she gets pregnant. Surely the point of this retelling was to warn against the perils of giving in to temptation. Story 19. Not trusting men who come to take your girls away in baskets is the main moral of this terrifying fairy tale. There are 3 daughters of a poor country guy. He can't wait to sell his eldest daughter as a wife to the wealthy guy who arrives with a wicker basket. The guy is easily persuaded when the same man returns a year later to purchase his last daughter. And he doesn't raise too many questions when the man shows up a year after that to buy another of his daughters. Stuffed inside the basket, the young woman is led into the woods. He tells her he has to go, and then he tells her to get the home ready for the big wedding celebration he's planning to attend when he gets back. He kindly offers her a golden ball and all the keys to his house, granting her permission to visit any room, save the one in the basement. She decides to put the golden ball and key aside and start exploring because she is smarter than her sisters. She discovers a gory torture chamber in the basement, complete with meat hooks displaying her sisters' decapitated heads. Even though they were all given the identical instructions, keys, and a magical ball, the girls in the basement each managed to drop it and cover it with blood that wouldn't cover. The girl disassembles them, puts each piece back together, and then conceals them in a golden basket, giving them life again. She begs her husband to bring the basket back for her dad. When he gets home, she dons her avian attire and makes her get away to her father's house in his absence, where she hides a severed head to ward off the onlookers who would surely beg, "Where is the bride?" The girl, her sisters, and her father end the sorcerer and his associates by trapping them in the home and setting them on fire when they return for the feast. Story 20, aside from the horrific face eating at the conclusion, this is a rather standard grim fairy tale. An evil stepsister and stepmother plague a girl's life. Her stepsister is unmotivated, and her stepmother despises her. The girl's stepmother disposes of her by plunging her down a well, hoping she would drown. A lovely place awaits the girl when she awakens. Things that need doing are all around her as she travels, including an apple tree that needs picking, bread that needs baking, and a house that needs cleaning. Payment doesn't even cross her mind while she accomplishes all this. Mother Holle, an eerie old woman, approaches up after she finishes cleaning the home and begs her to serve as a servant on the property. The girl agrees and puts in a whole year of hard effort. Mother Holle sends her back laden with jewels and gold when her time is up. The stepsister and stepmother were jealous of her good wealth when she arrived. Actually, the girl starts to scatter gems and jewelry as she tells her narrative. The stepmother has already pulled her own daughter into the pit before she even finishes telling her story. The girl is so slothful that she accomplishes absolutely nothing, which is really disappointing. She arrives at Mother Holle's house, wanting to be appointed a servant, lets the bread burn, and doesn't pick the apples. Mother Holle does, but she only stays for a little while before letting her leave. After she asks for a reward, Mother Holle sends her home after covering her with pitch. Toads and snakes sprung out of her lips as she started telling her tale the moment she arrived. For all time, a gigantic toad settles on her mother's face and chews on her nose. Final thoughts. Story 21, Mulan. The version you loved. There was once a young woman who, in order to protect her weak father from harm, chose to assume the identity of a man and fight in the army. The emperor rewards her for her bravery with a horse and a sack full of money, since she fights better and is braver than any male. When she returns home, her parents are overjoyed, and she instantly becomes a legend in her. A little dragon and a cricket, if you believe Disney, are also included. Chu Renhuo's Sui Tang Romance from 1675, the version your parents tried to shield you from. This fearless lady defied gender norms and appeared in several Chinese classics, including the Ballad of Mulan, from which Chef Renhuo's tale draws inspiration. No appearance from the Mushu Eddie Murphy persona, alas. Upon her return home with her spoils, Mulan is disappointed to learn that her father has passed away and that she is enjoined to be a concubine to Heshina Khan, the actual ruler of her area. Since she is a female and has been through enough during the battle, Mulan resolves to end her life. I long to be reunited with my father, so there was no happy ending in the end. Story 22, The Strange Feast. An invitation to supper was extended by a blood sausage, and the liver sausage graciously accepted. Strange sights greeted her when she entered the blood sausage's home, though. There was a monkey with a cut on its head, a broom and shovel arguing on the stairs, and more. This obscure German fairy tale was completely disregarded by the Disney men. The narrative becomes even shorter when the blood sausage follows the liver sausage down the stairs with a knife, ensuring that the liver sausage narrowly escapes with her casing intact. A song and dance routine is all it takes to provide mindless enjoyment for 90 minutes. Story 23, The Flea. One of the first things students learn in creative writing programs is how to hook the reader and keep them engaged in the story by using a startling or otherwise demanding premise. The Flea tells the story of a monarch who grows a bug to the size of a sheep, skins it as a science experiment, and then gives his daughter as an arranged marriage to the person who can identify the animal's fur. Seven half giants, whose abilities range from making fields full of razor blades to generating oceans full of soap suds, come to the rescue of the princess when she becomes stuck in an ogre's mansion eating men's carcasses for supper. The last European fairy tale with a gigantic insect playing such a pivotal, yet strangely peripheral part was The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. When Gregor Samsa woke up one morning from unsettling dreams, he found himself changed in his bed into a monstrous vermin. Story 24, the list begins with a monarch who marries off her daughter in the first of many stories by the Grimm brothers. She sent her daughter out with a maid and Faleda, a talking horse. And, as any good mother would, she concocted a charm from her own blood to ward against danger. A little while later, the princess felt parched and requested that her maid go to a nearby river for a drink. "If you want a drink, get it yourself," the maid said, shocking her. "I refuse to serve you." Her mother's charm slipped from her clothing and was carried away by the river when the princess leaned out to drink. The maid, seeing the defenseless princess, used coercion to change her clothing and horses and make her swear an ironclad vow to keep quiet about her real identity. The maid threatened to finish off the princess and hide her corpse in the woods if she had declined. Upon their arrival in the next country, the maid pretended to be the princess and wed the son of the monarch. In reality, the actual princess was compelled to work as a geese herder. Falada was butchered by the impostor in her desperate attempt to hide her identity. But the true princess, heartbroken at losing her only companion, enticed the butcher to hang himself from the city gate so she could commune with him daily. A tremendous wind was conjured by the princess to fling the boy's hat away when he attempted to pluck one of her golden hairs. The irritated young man went to the monarch to complain about the unusual female who could manipulate the weather and communicate with horse skeletons. Curiosity got the best of the king, who pleaded with the princess to spill the beans, but she declined. Even more intrigued, the king advised that she confide in the stove about her troubles, but he hid outside and discreetly listened in on the whole conversation. After matching his son with the legitimate princess, he had the impostor stripped down to her underwear and carried around the city till she passed away. Story 25, Hans the Hedgehog. The villagers teased the young guy in this Grimm brothers fable because his wife couldn't have children. The father begged God for a kid, expressing his extreme indecision and claiming he would be satisfied with anything, even a baby hedgehog. His worst nightmare came true when his beleaguered wife gave birth to a hybrid son they called Hans. Afraid of their hybrid offspring, which consisted of a hedgehog upper half and a human lower half, the parents stashed it away under the stove for 8 long years. He requested his father to shoe a rooster so Hans could ride it out into the woods to live, which is a surprising turn of events. In that location, he cared for sheep while playing bagpipes in the forest. A monarch once requested Hans for a map after becoming disoriented in the forest. In order for Hans to comply, the monarch needed to commit in writing to give him the first thing he saw upon his return. However, the king, who had some inkling that Hans couldn't read or write, fooled him into writing out an order for his soldiers to assault any hedgehog boys, riding roosters who showed up in the kingdom. Subsequently, another monarch had a same predicament. However, he resolved not to deceive Hans, and instead pledged to show him his lovely daughter upon his return to his realm. After that, Hans went to the first country, jumped over soldiers who were attempting to bayonet him, and used his quills to impale the daughter of the liar king. After that, he wed the princess in the second country. He became a regular guy on their wedding night when he tore off his hedgehog skin and had the guards burn it on a large fire.